she was pregnant when she left.
The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor. Kang Joon-ho didn't even feel it slip from his fingers. He didn't hear the guests around him, didn't notice the waiter rushing forward with a towel, didn't register the 300 of Seoul's wealthiest elite turning to stare. All he could see was her, across the ballroom, under the gold light of $1,000 chandelier, stood the woman he had spent 3 years trying to forget, Adiz. She was laughing at something. Head tilted back, that same laugh that used to fill his penthouse at 2 in the morning when neither of them could sleep. She was wearing emerald green, and she looked nothing like the woman who had walked out of his life with 2 suitcases and a signature on a divorce decree. She looked whole. She looked like a woman who had survived something and come out the other side stronger. And then Joon-ho's eyes dropped lower. The small hand wrapped around hers, the little girl, no older than 2.5. Dark curls, a yellow dress, and a face tilted up toward Adiz with total trust. Joon-ho's chest went tight. He told himself it was nothing. A niece. A friend's daughter. Coincidence. But then the child turned, scanning the room the way curious toddlers do. And Joon-ho's blood went cold. Slow, dawning dread. Those eyes, his mother's eyes. His grandfather's eyes. The Kang family eyes, passed down for 4 generations. Eyes he saw every single morning in his own bathroom mirror. "Sir, should I get you another glass?" The waiter's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Joon-ho didn't answer. He was already doing the math in his head, the way he calculated shipping margins and merger valuations. Except this equation had only one variable that mattered. 3 years since the divorce. The child looked 2, maybe 2.5. He felt the floor tilt beneath him. She was pregnant when she left. Joon-ho SSI. He barely registered his assistant's voice beside him. His legs were already moving, cutting through the crowd of investors and socialites like none of them existed. Someone called his name. He didn't stop. Adiz saw him coming before he reached her. He watched the exact moment recognition hit. Watched her spine straighten. Watched her hand tighten protectively around her daughter's small fingers. Watched 3 years of careful distance collapse into something raw and unguarded for just a single second before she rebuilt the wall. Joon-ho. Her voice was steady. Too steady. The voice of a woman who had rehearsed this exact moment in her head 100 times, just in case. Adiz. His own voice came out rougher than he intended. His eyes flicked down to the little girl, who was now half hidden behind her mother's leg, peering up at him with open curiosity. Who is this? The question hung in the air like a blade. Adiz's jaw tightened. This is my daughter. Your daughter. He repeated the word slowly, watching her face for any flicker of dishonesty. There wasn't one. There was only fear. Carefully controlled, but unmistakable. How old is she? Joon-ho, this isn't the place. How old, Adiz? A beat of silence stretched between them, thick enough to choke on. Around them, the gala continued. Laughter, clinking glasses, a string quartet playing something light and oblivious. But in the small space between Joon-ho and Adiz, the whole world had gone silent. 2 years and 9 months, Adiz said finally, quietly. Her name is Mira. Joon-ho closed his eyes. 2 years and 9 months. Their divorce had been finalized 3 years and 2 months ago. The math wasn't complicated. It never had been. He just hadn't let himself do it until tonight. Hadn't let himself imagine that the woman who walked out without explanation, without a fight, without even asking for the settlement she was entitled to, might have been carrying something far more important than money, his daughter. Why didn't you tell me? His voice cracked on the question, all the boardroom composure gone, stripped down to something raw and furious and devastated all at once. 3 years, Adiz. 3 years, I thought. You thought what? For the first time, her own composure slipped, anger flashing hot beneath the careful surface. You thought I left because I got tired of you? Because I wanted your money and ran the second I had enough? Is that what they told you? Who is they? Adiz's eyes searched his face, like she was trying to determine something. Whether he truly didn't know, or whether this was some cruel performance. Whatever she found there made something in her expression crumble. just slightly. You really don't know, she whispered. 3 years, and you actually believe I just left. Tell me the truth.
Right now.
Why did you go? Mira tugged on her mother's hand, sensing the tension even if she couldn't understand it. Iyama, she said softly. Iyama, who is this? The Korean word from his daughter's mouth hit Joon-ho like a physical blow. She had been raised speaking his language too. Adiz hadn't tried to erase him from the child's life. She had simply kept him at a distance. Adiz knelt slightly, brushing a hand over Myra's curls, her voice gentle in a way that broke something open in Joon-ho's chest. It's okay, sweetheart. Just someone mommy used to know. Someone mommy used to know. 3 years of silence, of believing the worst, of building a fortress around his heart so nothing could touch him again. And it had all been built on a lie he was only now beginning to understand. We need to talk, Joon-ho said. Not here.
Properly.
Tonight. I have a flight back to Lagos in 2 days. Then we have 2 days. His voice left no room for argument, but underneath the command was something closer to desperation. Adiz, please. I'm not asking as the man you divorced. I'm asking as her father. Quiet, breaking, the word hung between them.
Father.
Spoken aloud for the first time. And Joon-ho watched it land on Adiz like she had been waiting 3 years for someone to finally say it. Her eyes filled, just for a moment, before she blinked it back. Tomorrow, she said quietly. Come to the hotel. 10 in the morning. And Joon-ho. She paused, something hardening in her expression again. Whatever you think you know about why I left, you're wrong. All of it. And when I tell you the truth, you're not going to like who's responsible. She turned, lifting Mira into her arms, and walked toward the exit without looking back. Joon-ho stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom, his daughter's eyes still burning in his memory, a single name already rising unbidden in the back of his mind. A name he didn't want to consider, didn't want to believe, but couldn't shake. Seo-yeon, across the room, half hidden near the bar. A woman in a deep red dress watched the entire exchange with her jaw clenched tight and her knuckles white around the stem of her wineglass. She had spent 3 years making sure this exact moment would never happen, and now it had. Joon-ho hadn't slept. He sat in the back of his car at 9:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, staring up at the hotel where Adiz was waiting. And for the first time in 3 years, Kang Joon-ho, a man who controlled a $12 billion shipping empire, felt completely powerless, because somewhere on the 11th floor of this building was a daughter he had known existed for nearly 3 years, and somewhere in his own memory was a story about why Adiz left. A story he had believed without question, repeated to his mother, his board, himself. Every single night, he couldn't sleep. He was about to find out how much of it was a lie. Sir, we're here. His driver said. Joon-ho didn't move. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his mother, the third one that morning. Did you see her last night? Is it true about the child? News traveled fast in his world. He silenced the phone and stepped out of the car. Adiz opened the door before he could knock. She had clearly slept even less than he had. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her expression was composed, guarded. The same wall she had built at the gala, reinforced overnight. Myra's with my sister, she said, stepping aside to let him in. I thought it would be better if we talked alone first. The hotel suite was simple, tasteful, nothing like the penthouse they had once shared. Joon-ho noticed a small stuffed elephant on the couch, a child's sock peeking out from beneath a cushion, and something in his chest twisted painfully. Sit down, Adiz said. This is going to take a while. He sat. She remained standing, arms crossed, like she needed the distance to get through what came next.
Tell me what they told you, she said.
About why I left. I want to hear the version you've been carrying around for 3 years. Joon-ho's jaw tightened. That you had grown tired of the marriage. That the pressure of my family, the business, the public scrutiny, it became too much. That you wanted out, and you wanted out clean. So you refused the settlement and went home. And you believed that. You left no note, Adiz. No call. Just a signed agreement on my desk and an empty closet. What was I supposed to believe? Something flashed in her eyes. Not quite anger, something closer to grief. I believe something too, Joon-ho. For 3 years, I believed something about you that made leaving the only option I had. His stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Adiz walked to the window, her back to him, and for a long moment, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I believed you were sleeping with her. The words landed like a physical blow.
What?
Who?
Don't.
Adiz turned, and now there were tears in her eyes, but her voice was hard. Don't stand there and pretend you don't know. Seo-yeon. Joon-ho felt the room tilt. Seo-yeon? She's my executive assistant. She has been with the company for, I know exactly how long she has been with the company. Adiz cut in. Long enough to have a key to your office. Long enough to know your schedule better than I did. Long enough to send me photographs. Photographs of what? Adiz pulled her phone from her pocket, her hands trembling slightly as she opened an old folder buried deep in her files. Images she had clearly looked at 1,000 times and never been able to delete. She held the phone out to him. Joon-ho took it, and his blood went cold. The first image showed him and Seo-yeon at what appeared to be his office, late at night. Her hand on his shoulder, his head bent close to hers, an intimacy in the angle that made his stomach turn. The second showed them at a restaurant he didn't even recognize. The third, I never went to this restaurant, he said slowly, staring at the screen. I have never seen this place in my life. That's what you're going to say now, Adiz said, but her voice wavered, like some part of her wanted desperately to believe him. Adiz, I'm telling you the truth. I don't know where these were taken. I don't know when. He scrolled through the images again, his mind racing. These look staged. Look at the lighting. It's inconsistent with the timestamps. I'm not a photo analyst, Joon-ho. I was a pregnant woman who received an anonymous message with 11 photographs and a note that said, ask him about the merger trip to Busan and ask him why he lied about where he stayed. Joon-ho went very still. I never lied about Busan. I told you I stayed at the Grand Hyatt for the merger negotiations. I have the receipts, the room service charges, everything. Seo-yeon told me you stayed somewhere else. She showed me a hotel confirmation with her name and yours on the same reservation. The room went silent except for the distant hum of traffic 11 floors below. She forged it, Joon-ho said quietly, almost to himself. She forged a hotel reservation. I didn't know that. I couldn't know that. All I knew was that I was 3 months pregnant, terrified, and the only person I trusted completely had apparently been lying to me for months. So, I made a decision. Adiz's voice cracked, the composure finally breaking. I decided I would rather raise my daughter alone, with dignity, than stay in a marriage built on betrayal. I didn't ask for money, because I didn't want anything from you. I just wanted to disappear and protect her. Joon-ho stood, crossing the room toward her, stopping just short of reaching for her. Adiz, I swear to you, on my daughter's life, I never touched Seo-yeon. Not once. Not ever. Then explain the photos. I don't know yet, but I will. His voice hardened with a fury she hadn't seen from him before. Not the cold, controlled anger of the boardroom, but something raw and personal. Someone spent months building a lie elaborate enough to end my marriage and hide my daughter from me for 3 years. And I think we both know exactly who had the access, the motive, and the patience to do it. Adiz met his eyes, and for the first time since the gala, something like alliance flickered between them instead of suspicion. There's something else, she said quietly. Something I never told anyone. Not even my sister. Joon-ho's chest tightened. What? A week before I left, Seo-yeon came to see me. Alone, while you were in Busan. Adiz's hands were shaking now. She didn't just show me photographs, Joon-ho. She made me a promise. She said if I left quietly, she would make sure I was taken care of financially for the rest of my life. But if I stayed and fought for the marriage, what did she say? Adiz's eyes met his, hollow, with a fear 3 years old. She said accidents happen to people who don't know when to walk away. She wasn't talking about me. Joon-ho felt something cold and lethal settle into his chest. She was talking about Mira. The silence in the room was deafening, because if Seo-yeon was willing to threaten an unborn child to secure her place in Joon-ho's life 3 years ago, the question now wasn't just what she had done. It was what she was still capable of doing now that her secret was unraveling in real time. And somewhere across the city, in a high-rise office with a perfect view of the harbor, Yoon Seo-yeon was already making calls. 3 years ago, Adise Kang had been 7 months pregnant and completely alone, sitting on the floor of her closet at 2 a.m., holding a phone with 11 photographs that would end her marriage. Now, in a hotel suite 11 floors above Seoul, she was about to relive every single second of it out loud. And this time, Joon-ho was going to hear the part of the story he never knew existed. "You need to understand something," Adise said, sitting down across from him for the first time since he had arrived. "I didn't leave because of one conversation. I left because of 3 months of carefully built evidence. Seo-yeon didn't just show up with photographs and threats. She was patient. She was thorough. And by the time she was finished, I didn't trust my own husband enough to ask him a single honest question. Start from the beginning," Joon-ho said. "I need to know everything." Adise closed her eyes, and the memory pulled her back like a tide point 3 years earlier. It had started small. A text message that came through on Joon-ho's phone while Adise was beside him on the couch. A name she didn't recognize. A message that read only, "Miss you already." Gone before she could ask about it because Joon-ho had simply laughed it off as a wrong number and deleted it. She hadn't thought much of it. Not then. 2 weeks later, Seo-yeon started appearing at dinners that used to be just the two of them. Business dinners, Joon-ho called them. Necessary for the merger. Adise sat through 4 of them, watching the way Seo-yeon leaned a little too close when she laughed at his jokes, watched the way she touched his arm to make a point, watched and told herself she was imagining things. Because surely, the man who had married her, who had stood in front of his own disapproving mother and chosen her anyway, wasn't capable of that. Then came the late nights. The merger negotiations in Busan that stretched from 3 days into 5. The phone calls that went to voicemail. The exhaustion in Joon-ho's voice that she told herself was just stress. And then, one evening while he was in the shower, his phone lit up on the nightstand, a message from Seo-yeon. A photograph attached. Adise hadn't meant to look. But the preview was already on the screen. And what she saw made her hands go cold. It was a picture of the two of them. Joon-ho and Seo-yeon, close together, his hand resting on her waist, both of them smiling at the camera like they belonged in the frame together. The caption read, "Can't wait for next week. Just the two of us again." "I confronted him that night," Adise said, her voice flat with the memory. "He said it wasn't what it looked like. He said the photo was old, from a company event years before we even met. He said Seo-yeon had a habit of sending odd messages, and he would talk to HR about it." "I never said that," Joon-ho interrupted, his voice tight with disbelief. "Adise, I swear to you, I never had that conversation." "I know that now," Adise said quietly.
But I didn't know it then.
"Because 2 days later, Seo-yeon came to see me directly. Alone. While you were traveling." The memory sharpened. Seo-yeon had arrived at the penthouse in the early afternoon, dressed impeccably, carrying a leather folder like she was there for a business meeting instead of an ambush. She had sat across from Adise with a kind of composed sympathy that made Adise's skin crawl in hindsight. Sympathy that was really just performance. "I think you deserve to know the truth," Seo-yeon had said, sliding the folder across the table. "I have tried to stay quiet about this for your sake. But you're pregnant now, and you deserve better than living a lie." Inside the folder, 11 photographs. A forged hotel reservation for the Busan trip, dated and time-stamped with both their names. Screenshots of messages that looked, at a glance, indistinguishable from real conversations between Joon-ho and Seo-yeon. Messages Adise now understood had likely been fabricated using deleted threads and doctored timestamps. Technology Seo-yeon clearly had both the access and the patience to manipulate. "I'm telling you this because I respect you," Seo-yeon had said, her voice gentle, almost mournful. "Joon-ho isn't a bad man. He's just weak, and his family has always wanted someone like me for him." Someone who understands this world, who can carry the Kang name the way it needs to be carried. You were always going to be temporary, Adiz. I'm sorry no one had the courage to tell you sooner. And then, Adiz said, her voice trembling now as she returned to the present, sitting across from Joon-ho in the hotel suite. She said the part one never repeated to anyone. Not my sister. Not my lawyer. No one. Joon-ho leaned forward. Tell me. She said if I stayed and made this difficult, if I tried to expose her or fight for the marriage, or even just confront you publicly, she would make sure the child I was carrying never made it to its first birthday in good health. She said it so calmly, Joon-ho, like she was discussing the weather. She said accidents happen to babies all the time, and no one would ever think to look at the new executive assistant who had only started a year ago. The color drained from Joon-ho's face. She threatened to kill our daughter. She threatened to make it look like an accident, Adiz said, which terrified me more because it meant she had already thought it through. She had a plan. She wasn't bluffing. I could see it in her eyes. So I made the only choice that made sense to a terrified, betrayed pregnant woman with no family in this country and no one to trust. I disappeared. I refused the settlement so there would be no paper trail. No reason for anyone to come looking for me. No financial motive Seo-yeon could use to paint me as greedy if she ever needed to discredit me later. I went home to Lagos, and I told myself I would raise my daughter somewhere Seo-yeon could never reach her. Joon-ho sat in silence for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists on his knees, his jaw working as he processed the full weight of what 3 years of his life had actually been. She didn't just lie to end our marriage, he said slowly. She manufactured a threat specific enough to make you run without ever giving me a chance to defend myself. She knew that if you confronted me directly, I could have proven the photos were fake. So she made sure you never would. Yes. And then she spent 3 years telling me and everyone in my family that you left because you never really loved me, that you wanted out the moment you could. Adiz's eyes filled, but her voice was steady now, sharpened by 3 years of carrying this alone. She has been planning a future with you this entire time, Joon-ho. While you were grieving a marriage you didn't understand the truth about, she has been positioning herself as the woman who stayed. The loyal one. The one your mother already approves of. Joon-ho stood abruptly, crossing to the window, staring down at the city that Seo-yeon had spent 3 years quietly conquering while he mourned a lie. There's something you need to know, he said, his back still to her. Last night, after the gala, I didn't go home. I went to the office. I pulled every record I could access of Seo-yeon's company devices, her travel logs, her expense reports from 3 years ago. Adiz stood. What did you find? Joon-ho turned around, and there was something cold and dangerous in his expression now. The look of a man who no longer had any doubts left to protect him from the truth. An expense report from a private security firm, paid through a shell account linked to her assistant. Dated 4 days before you left Seoul. What kind of security firm? The kind that doesn't do background checks, Adiz. His voice was low, almost a whisper. The kind that specializes in surveillance. And in making problems disappear. Adiz's hand flew to her mouth. She wasn't bluffing about having a plan, Joon-ho said. She had people. Resources. And if I hadn't seen Mira at that gala last night, if we hadn't run into each other by pure chance, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Outside, 11 floors below, a black car pulled up to the hotel entrance and idled at the curb, its driver watching the building's entrance with quiet, practiced patience. Inside that car, Yoon Seo-yeon checked her phone one final time, reading a message from her contact inside Joon-ho's IT department. A message confirming that someone had accessed restricted security files at 1 a.m. that morning. Someone was getting too close. She closed her eyes, exhaled once, and made a decision 3 years in the making. It was time to stop protecting her secret quietly. It was time to make sure Adiz Kang disappeared again. Permanently this time. Yoon Seo-yeon had not clawed her way from a junior assistant position to the executive floor of Kang Holdings by leaving things to chance, and she was not about to start now. She sat in the back of her car outside Adi's hotel, watching the entrance with the same patient focus she had once used to study Joon-ho's calendar, his preferences, his weaknesses. Every detail that had let her insert herself into his life so seamlessly that his own family had stopped questioning her presence in it. Her phone buzzed. A message from her contact in IT, confirming what she already suspected. Kang Joon-ho accessed restricted security archive logs at 1:14 a.m. Files related to vendor payments, 2023. Should I flag this to compliance? Seo-yeon typed back a single word. No flagging, it would create a paper trail. And paper trails were exactly what had gotten her into this position of power in the first place. She understood better than anyone how a carefully placed document could destroy a life. She wasn't about to leave one behind for someone else to use against her. She needed a different approach. Something quieter. By 11 a.m., Seo-yeon was back in her office on the 40th floor of Kang Holdings. The harbor stretched out gray and glittering below her windows. This was the world she had built. An office with her name on the door, a seat at every executive meeting, a place at Joon-ho's mother's dinner table every Sunday for the last 2 years. She had earned this. That is what she told herself every single time the guilt threatened to surface. She had given Joon-ho 3 years of unwavering loyalty while his foreign wife abandoned him without explanation. She had comforted him through merger collapses and board disputes and the quiet grief he never talked about but carried in his shoulders every day. She had built herself into the woman his mother already called the right kind of partner for this family. And she was not going to let one chance encounter at a gala unravel 3 years of careful architecture. Her assistant knocked and entered without waiting for a response. Ms. Yoon, Chairwoman Kang is online too. She wants to discuss the gala. Seo-yeon straightened her blazer and picked up the phone, her voice instantly warm, instantly composed. Mother Kang, I was hoping you would call. Is it true? Joon-ho's mother, a sharp, formidable woman who had run half the company's board decisions through quiet influence for 2 decades, didn't waste time on pleasantries. The girl, the African woman's child. Is she really his? Seo-yeon hesitated for exactly the right amount of time. Long enough to suggest reluctance, not long enough to suggest evasion. I don't know for certain, but the timing is concerning. If that child is a Kang heir, this becomes a legal matter, not just an emotional one. The board will want clarity. The shareholders will want clarity. A pause. And I will want to know why you didn't tell me you suspected something like this when she first left. I didn't know, Mother Kang. None of us did. Adiz left no explanation. And yet you have always had theories. Seo-yeon felt the floor shift slightly beneath the conversation. Joon-ho's mother wasn't accusing her of anything directly, but the older woman had spent decades reading subtext in boardrooms, and Seo-yeon understood. She needed to be careful. My only concern has ever been Joon-ho's well-being, she said smoothly, and the company's stability. If there is a legitimate heir, that needs to be handled correctly. Quietly, legally, without giving outside parties any leverage. Outside parties, the chairwoman repeated. You mean the mother? I mean anyone who might use a child as a means of extracting money or influence from this family, Seo-yeon said, and even as the words left her mouth, she felt the old, practiced ease of redirection settling into place. This was what she did best, taking a true thing and bending it just slightly until it served her. I'm not suggesting Adiz is doing that. I'm simply saying the family should be cautious. There was a long pause on the line. Find out the truth, Seo-yeon. Quietly. I want to know if that child is really my grandchild before this becomes a scandal the press can get their hands on. Of course. The call ended, and Seo-yeon set the phone down slowly, her mind already racing 3 steps ahead. The chairwoman wanted quiet confirmation. That bought her time. But time wasn't the only thing she needed. She needed Adiz gone before any DNA test could be arranged, before Joon-ho's growing suspicion calcified into something he could act on, before the surveillance firm invoice from 3 years ago surfaced in a place she couldn't control. She opened a secure messaging app on a second phone. One that had never been registered under her name, paid for entirely in cash 2 years ago for exactly this kind of contingency. and typed a message to a contact she hadn't needed in 3 years. Situation has resurfaced. Need updated location and movement schedule for AK discretion required. Same rate as before. The reply came back within minutes. Understood. 24 hours. Seo-yeon closed the app, deleted the conversation thread, and slipped the phone back into the locked drawer of her desk. Across the city, in his office on the same floor, Joon-ho was on a very different kind of call. I need everything you have on Yoon Seo-yeon's financial activity going back for years, he said to Han Min-jun, the private investigator he had quietly retained that morning. A man recommended by a friend specifically because he had no ties to anyone in Joon-ho's social circle. Bank transfers, shell accounts, anything routed through third parties. And I need to know about a security firm payment from 3 years ago. I'll send you the reference number. That's a significant ask on short notice, Min-jun said. What am I actually looking for? Joon-ho's hand tightened around his phone. Evidence that the woman I trusted with my company for 3 years destroyed my marriage and may have threatened my daughter's life before she was even born. A pause on the line. I'll need 48 hours. You have 24.
I don't think we have more time than that.
He hung up and immediately dialed Adiz. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight with tension. Joon-ho, what is it? Where's Mira right now? With my sister, like I told you.
Why?
I need you both somewhere secure. Tonight. His voice was clipped, urgent. The voice of a man no longer operating on suspicion, but on certainty. Seo-yeon spoke to my mother this morning. I have someone monitoring her financial activity, and I have a very bad feeling about how she's going to respond to being cornered. You think she's going to do something? I think a woman willing to threaten an unborn child 3 years ago isn't going to hesitate now that her entire future is at risk. He was already grabbing his jacket, already moving toward the elevator. I'm sending a security team to your hotel within the hour. Please, Adiz. I know you have no reason to trust me with your safety, but trust me with hers. There was a long pause on the line. Adiz weighing 3 years of guarded independence against the rising dread in her own chest. A dread she realized she had been quietly carrying since the moment she saw Joon-ho's face across the ballroom and understood, somewhere underneath the anger, that her secret was no longer fully hers to protect alone. Okay, she said finally quietly. But, Joon-ho, if anything happens to her, nothing is going to happen to her, he said, with a ferocity that surprised even himself. I just found out I have a daughter. I am not losing her before I have even had the chance to know her. He stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut behind him, and caught his own reflection in the polished steel. A man who, 24 hours ago, had believed his ex-wife simply stopped loving him. Now he was racing across the city to protect a child he had known for less than a day, from a woman he had trusted for 3 years. 40 floors above him, Seo-yeon stood at her window, watching the harbor, her second phone already buzzing with a new message from her contact. Confirmed location. Movement window tomorrow, 7 a.m. Hotel checkout. Transport to airport. Clean opportunity. She read the message twice, her reflection ghostly pale in the glass against the gray Seoul sky. Tomorrow morning. The airport. She had less than 20 hours to make sure Adiz Kang never boarded that flight to Lagos. And even less time to make sure no one ever traced it back to her. 6 hours. That was all Joon-ho knew for certain. 6 hours until whatever Seo-yeon was planning at the airport tomorrow morning, and somewhere in those 6 hours, he had also promised himself something else entirely. 6 hours to finally meet his daughter. The security team arrived at Adiz's hotel within the hour, just as he had promised. For men, quiet and professional, positioned discreetly enough that Mira wouldn't notice anything was wrong. Joon-ho followed an hour later, standing outside the hotel room door with his heart hammering harder than it ever had in any boardroom, any negotiation, any moment of his entire controlled, calculated life. Adiz opened the door. Behind her, sitting cross-legged on the carpet surrounded by crayons and a half-finished drawing, was Mira. She knows someone's coming, Adiz said quietly. I haven't told her who. I didn't know how to.
Can I?
Joon-ho's voice caught. Can I just sit with her? I don't need to explain anything yet. I just want to be near her. Adiz studied his face for a long moment, searching, the way she had been searching since the gala, for any sign that this was performance instead of truth. Whatever she saw seemed to settle something in her, because she stepped aside and let him, and Joon-ho lowered himself slowly to the carpet, keeping a careful distance, watching his daughter's small hand move a purple crayon across the page in fierce, focused scribbles. "What are you drawing?" he asked softly. Mira looked up at him with open, unguarded curiosity, the particular fearlessness of a child who hadn't yet learned to be careful with strangers. "A elephant," she said. "Like Iyama's." She held up the stuffed elephant from the couch, presenting it to him with the seriousness of a formal introduction. "He's very handsome," Joon-ho said, and his voice cracked slightly on the words. Mira giggled. Then, without warning, without hesitation, the way only very small children can do, she crawled directly into his lap and held the elephant up for him to inspect more closely. Joon-ho froze. 3 years of controlled grief, of telling himself he would survive without ever having children of his own because the woman he loved had simply stopped loving him back, of building higher and higher walls around a heart he had assumed was permanently closed. All of it collapsed in the single weight of his daughter settling against his chest like she had always belonged there. He looked up at Adiz, and the tears he had been holding back since the gala finally broke free. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Adiz, she's perfect, and I missed almost 3 years of this." Adiz's own eyes filled, watching the man she had spent 3 years believing had betrayed her completely now sitting on a hotel carpet, undone by a stuffed elephant and a child's trust. "She has your stubbornness," Adiz said quietly, sitting down across from them. "She refuses to nap unless everything in the room is exactly how she wants it. She negotiates everything like she's already running a company." A wet laugh escaped Joon-ho. "That sounds about right." For nearly an hour, something almost ordinary happened in that hotel room. A father meeting his daughter for the first time, learning the shape of her laugh, the stubborn set of her jaw when she didn't get her way, the way she said his name experimentally for the first time when Adiz gently told her, "This is your APPA, Mira." APPA, the word seemed to physically move through Joon-ho's chest, hushed, trembling, the emotional peak of the episode. Mira tested the word out herself, looking up at him with the same dark eyes he saw every morning in the mirror. "APPA." "Yes," he said, his voice barely steady. "I'm your APPA." It was, without question, the single best moment of his entire life. If you are feeling this moment with Joon-ho right now, if that APPA hit you somewhere deep, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from tonight. I read every single one, and it means more than you know. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because this story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. That perfect moment lasted exactly 43 minutes before his phone began buzzing with a call he couldn't ignore. Min-jun, the investigator. Joon-ho stepped into the hallway, Myra's small voice still calling something to her mother behind him, and answered. "Tell me you found something." "I found everything." Min-jun's voice was tight, urgent. "The security firm payment from 3 years ago. I traced it through 2 shell accounts back to a private account under Seo-yeon's sister's name. Same firm just got paid again. Yesterday afternoon." Joon-ho's blood ran cold. "Yesterday. After the gala." "After the gala," Min-jun confirmed. "I also found something else. 3 years ago, the same week your wife left, Seo-yeon authorized a photography contractor through a marketing budget line. Except the contractor doesn't do marketing work. He does forensic-grade photo composition. Wedding photographers mostly, but also some less legitimate work. The kind of work where you need to convincingly place 2 people in a photo together who were never actually in the same room. She faked the photos. I would put money on it." I am still pulling his client list to confirm, but Joon-ho, this isn't speculation anymore. This is a paper trail. Joon-ho closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the hallway wall, equal parts vindicated and devastated. Vindicated, because the truth was finally surfacing exactly the way he had believed it would. Devastated, because every piece of evidence was a fresh reminder of exactly how much time had been stolen from him. From both of them. "What about tomorrow?" he said. The new security firm payment. What is she planning? That I don't know yet. But given the pattern, and given that the payment was processed within hours of seeing you and your ex-wife together publicly, I would assume she is planning something fast and decisive. People who panic make payments like this when they are trying to remove a threat before it fully materializes. Remove a threat, Joon-ho repeated quietly. She means Adiz. I would get protection on both of them immediately. Not just standard security. People who know what they are doing. Already done. Joon-ho's jaw tightened. Keep digging. I want everything by morning. Every dollar, every shell company, every name connected to her. He ended the call and stood in the hallway for a long moment, steadying himself before walking back into the hotel room. Back into the warmth of his daughter's laughter, back into a version of his life he had never let himself imagine was possible. Mira looked up the moment he walked back in, holding her drawing toward him with fierce pride. APPA, look. It was a crude, beautiful scribble of 3 figures holding hands. One tall, one medium, one small, standing beneath a lopsided yellow sun. Joon-ho knelt down and took the drawing with both hands like it was the most valuable document he had ever held in his life. This is the best thing anyone has ever given me, he said quietly behind him. Adiz watched the exchange with an expression caught somewhere between grief for the years they had lost and a fragile, dangerous hope for what might still be possible. And beneath both of those feelings, a low current of fear she couldn't quite shake, because Joon-ho's face, when he had stepped back into the room, had carried something underneath the warmth. Something he was trying very hard not to let her see. What did the call say? She asked quietly. Once Mira had wandered back to her crayons, Joon-ho hesitated, weighing how much truth to give her in this exact moment, and decided, finally, that after 3 years of secrets destroying both their lives, he wasn't going to start their future with another one. She has confirmed it, he said quietly. The photos were fabricated. There is a paper trail. We have proof. That's good. That's what we needed.
It is.
He glanced toward Mira, then back to Adiz, his expression hardening with a fear he could no longer hide. But she also made another payment yesterday. To the same security firm she used 3 years ago. Processed hours after she saw us together at the gala. Adiz went very still. What kind of payment? Joon-ho's hand found hers, gripping it tightly, his eyes steady on hers even as his voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. Tone shifts, warmth drains into fear. The kind that means she is not done. The kind that means tomorrow morning, when you are scheduled to check out of this hotel and head to the airport, she is going to make her move. Outside, the sun was beginning to set over Seoul, painting the skyline in deep orange and gold. Beautiful and completely indifferent to the fact that somewhere across that same skyline, a woman with nothing left to lose was finalizing the details of a plan 3 years in the making. Adiz hadn't slept. She sat on the edge of the hotel bed, watching Myra's small chest rise and fall in sleep, counting down the hours until a 7 a.m. checkout that suddenly felt less like a routine and more like a countdown to something she couldn't see coming. Down the hall, behind a door guarded by 2 of Joon-ho's security men, Joon-ho himself hadn't slept either. He was on his 4th cup of coffee, staring at a laptop screen filled with documents Min-joon had sent over the last 6 hours. And what he was looking at had stopped being about clearing his name an hour ago. Now it was about survival. Read me the timeline again, Joon-ho said into the phone, pacing the length of his office. 3 years ago, for days before Adiz left Seoul. Payment to Park Surveillance Group, processed through a shell company called Cosmos Logistics, which traces back to an account controlled by Seo Yun's younger sister. Min-joon said, his voice clipped with exhaustion and adrenaline in equal measure. 2 days after that, a payment to a photo contractor named Lee Sang-hoon. He is not answering calls, but I found 3 other clients of his. A divorce attorney, a corporate blackmail case from 4 years ago, and a custody dispute. All of them paid him for the exact same service.
Composite photography.
Convincing fakes. And yesterday? Same shell company. Same surveillance firm. New payment, processed at 11:47 a.m. 90 minutes after she would have heard about you and Adiz at the gala. Min-joon paused. Joon-ho, I need to tell you something else. I pulled employment records for a park surveillance group. 2 of their operatives have prior arrests. Nothing convicted. Charges dropped both times. Oddly enough. But one was for assault. The other was a stalking complaint that got quietly buried. Joon-ho's stomach turned. She is not hiring people to watch Adiz. She is hiring people to hurt her. I can't say that for certain, but given the pattern, yes. That would be my assumption. Joon-ho closed his eyes, gripping the edge of his desk. I need this documented. Everything. Sent to my personal email, backed up somewhere she can't touch, and I need a printed copy ready by morning. Already done. But Joon-ho, if you're thinking about confronting her with this directly, I would advise against it. A woman who has spent 3 years building an elaborate cover for fraud and intimidation isn't going to fold just because you wave evidence at her. She will destroy whatever she can before you can use it against her. You need law enforcement involved before you tip her off. There's no time. The checkout is at 7 a.m. Then move the checkout. Get Adiz and the child somewhere safer tonight, quietly, without using any of the normal channels Seo-yeon could be tracking. Don't give her a fixed point to target. Joon-ho was already moving before Min-jun finished the sentence, grabbing his jacket, dialing Adiz's number as he walked toward the elevator. She answered immediately. Joon-ho, I need you to pack a bag right now. Just the essentials. We are leaving the hotel tonight. Not in the morning. What's happening? I'll explain everything in the car. Please, Adiz. Just trust me for the next 20 minutes. 40 minutes later, Adiz sat in the back of an armored car beside a sleeping Mira, watching the lights of Seoul blur past the window as Joon-ho sat across from her, laptop open, scrolling through page after page of financial documents with the focused intensity of a man trying to outrun a clock only he could see. Tell me everything, Adiz said quietly. All of it. No more protecting me from the details. Joon-ho turned the laptop toward her, walking her through the shell companies, the surveillance firm, the photo contractors' other clients, the operatives with buried records. By the time he finished, Adiz's hands were shaking. She is not just trying to discredit me anymore, she whispered. She is trying to make me disappear. Permanently. I won't let that happen. You can't promise that, Joon-ho. You don't control what she does. None of us do. I can promise you this. His voice was low, fierce, utterly certain. I have already filed a report with the Financial Crimes Division. I have copies of everything with 3 separate people who are not connected to my company. If anything happens to either of you, there is a trail that leads directly back to her, and it will end her. That's not the same as keeping us safe tonight. Joon-ho's jaw tightened, because she was right, and he knew it. The car slowed. Why are we stopping? Adiz asked, her voice sharpening with alarm. We are not supposed to be, the driver said over the intercom, his voice suddenly tense. There is a vehicle blocking the intersection ahead. 2 cars. Hazards on, but no breakdown visible. Joon-ho's blood went cold. Reverse.
Now.
Take the alternate route we discussed. Already on it, sir. The car lurched into reverse, and through the rear windshield, Adiz watched as one of the stationary vehicles ahead suddenly flicked on its headlights and began rolling slowly forward. Not fast enough to be panicked, but with a deliberate, predatory patience that made every instinct in her body scream. Joon-ho. Her voice had gone very quiet, very still. The calm of pure terror. They are following us. Joon-ho spun toward the front of the car. Lose them. Now. The driver swung hard down a side street, tires screeching against wet asphalt, and Mira stirred awake in Adiz's arms, confused and beginning to cry at the sudden motion. It's okay, baby, it's okay. Adiz whispered, holding her daughter tight against her chest, her eyes never leaving the back window where the second car's headlights had just reappeared, closing the distance. They are still behind us, she said. Joon-ho grabbed his phone, dialing a number with shaking hands. This is Kang Joon-ho. I need police backup on Yeongdong-daero, headed northbound, immediately. We are being followed by a vehicle I believe is connected to an active threat against my family. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the speaker, calm and procedural, completely at odds with the chaos in the back of the car. The driver took a sharp left, then another, weaving through side streets Adiz didn't recognize, the second car's headlights flickering in and out of view behind them like something out of a nightmare she couldn't wake from. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the headlights vanished, gone. No turn visible, no explanation, just empty street behind them where danger had been seconds before. Where did they go? Adiz whispered. I don't know, Joon-ho said, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, his entire body coiled tight. I don't know, and that terrifies me more than if they were still there. The car continued in tense silence for several minutes, Myra's cries softening into exhausted hiccups against her mother's shoulder, until finally Joon-ho's phone buzzed with a new message, not from Min-jun, not from the police dispatcher, from an unknown number. He stared at the screen for a long moment before showing it to Adiz, his hand visibly unsteady. You should have stayed in Lagos. Some doors, once closed, are not meant to be reopened. Last warning that Adiz's breath caught in her throat. She knows we are moving. She knows exactly where we were. Joon-ho's eyes lifted slowly from the phone to meet hers, and what she saw in his expression chilled her more than the message itself. That's not possible, he said quietly. Only 4 people knew our route tonight. Min-jun, my driver, my head of security,
and
his jaw clenched, the final piece falling into place with sickening clarity. And whoever leaked it to Seo-yeon is someone I trusted enough to be in this car with us right now. The driver's eyes flicked up to the rearview mirror, just for a fraction of a second, but long enough for Adiz to see it, long enough for the silence in the car to turn suffocating. Stop the car. Joon-ho's voice was low, controlled, and utterly lethal. The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror again, and this time Adiz saw it clearly. Not fear of the danger behind them, but something closer to guilt. Sir, we shouldn't stop, not until we are somewhere secure. I said stop the car. The vehicle slowed to the curb on a quiet side street, engine idling, the silence inside thick enough to choke on. Mira had finally settled against Adiz's shoulder, exhausted into sleep despite everything, and Adiz held her tighter, watching Joon-ho's face transform into something she had never seen before. Not the grieving man from the gala, not the tender father from the hotel room floor, but a man who built and dismantled billion-dollar deals for a living, now turning that same precision on the person sitting 18 inches away from his daughter. How long have you worked for me, Tae-sik? Joon-ho asked quietly, the driver's hands tightened on the wheel. 6 years, sir. And in 6 years, has anyone outside my head of security ever had access to my real-time travel routes? Silence. Answer me. Sir, I would never. I didn't ask if you would. Asked if anyone has access. Joon-ho's voice didn't rise, but it sharpened into something far more dangerous than shouting. Because exactly 4 people knew the route we took tonight. And 90 seconds after we changed direction to lose a vehicle that was following us, I received a text message proving someone in this car gave away our location in real time. Joon-ho. Adiz's voice was quiet, urgent. Not here. Not with her in the car. He glanced at his sleeping daughter, and something in his expression cracked slightly. The fury banked, but not extinguished. Pull into the next secure lot, he said to the driver.
Now.
20 minutes later, in the underground parking structure of a private medical building Joon-ho's family had used for decades, Adiz sat in the back of the car with Mira while Joon-ho stood outside with Tae-sik, the overhead fluorescent lights casting both men in harsh, clinical white. I want the truth, Joon-ho said. Right now. Before I call the police and let them find it for me, which will be significantly worse for you. Tae-sik's composure finally cracked. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't know what she wanted the information for. I swear to you, I didn't know. Joon-ho went very still. Seo-yeon. She came to me 3 weeks ago. Before any of this, before the gala, before any of it. She said she just wanted updates on your schedule, your routine. She said it was for your mother, for security planning around the upcoming shareholder meeting. I had no reason to question it. She has been part of this family for years. And last night, Tae-sik's eyes dropped to the concrete floor. She called an hour before we left the hotel. Asked where we were headed. I told her the original route. The one we changed at the last minute because Mr. Han suggested it. I didn't know there was a threat. I didn't know anyone would be in danger. I thought it was just scheduling. You didn't think it was strange that she wanted real-time movements of my family in the middle of the night? Tae-sik had no answer. Joon-ho stared at him for a long, cold moment, years of trust collapsing into something he would have to rebuild from nothing. If he ever could. You are done, Joon-ho said quietly. Effective immediately. And you are going to give a full statement to my investigator about every single conversation you have had with Seo-yeon over the last 3 weeks, or, I promise you, the consequences will extend far beyond losing your job. Yes, sir. I understand. I'm sorry. Joon-ho turned away without another word, walking back toward the car, his hands clenched at his sides. And that was when his phone rang. Seo-yeon's name lit up the screen. He stared at it for 3 full rings before answering, putting the call on speaker as Adiz leaned forward to listen, Mira still sleeping against her chest. Joon-ho. Seo-yeon's voice was warm, almost concerned, the same voice she had used for 3 years to convince an entire family she belonged among them. I heard there was some kind of security incident tonight. Are you alright? Is Adiz safe? The casual cruelty of the question, asking after Adiz's safety in the exact moment she had orchestrated the threat to it, made something in Joon-ho's chest go ice cold. We are fine, he said, his voice deceptively calm. No thanks to you. A pause, brief but telling. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I have the surveillance firm payments, Seo-yeon. 3 years ago, and again yesterday afternoon, 90 minutes after the gala. I have the photo contractor who fabricated the images you used to convince Adiz I was unfaithful. I have a driver willing to testify that you tracked our movements tonight in real time. His voice hardened with every sentence. I know everything. So, let us stop pretending. The silence on the line stretched long enough that Adiz thought the call had dropped. When Seo-yeon finally spoke again, her voice had changed completely. The warmth gone, replaced by something flatter, colder, almost amused. You don't actually have anything, Joon-ho. You have shell companies that lead to accounts that aren't in my name. You have a driver who will say whatever keeps him out of prison. You have nothing that would survive even basic legal scrutiny. And you know that, which is exactly why you are calling me instead of the police. Joon-ho's jaw tightened. She wasn't wrong, and the realization burned. This isn't over, he said. No. Seo-yeon agreed quietly. It isn't. But you should think very carefully about what happens next, Joon-ho. Your mother has spent 2 years building her trust in me. Your board has spent 2 years watching me run divisions more profitably than anyone else in this company. And the woman in the back seat of your car, the one you are so desperate to protect, has spent 3 years as a complete unknown to everyone in your world. Who do you think they will believe when this becomes public? An African woman with no proof and a convenient timeline, or the executive your own family already trusts? You threatened to kill my daughter before she was even born. I never said any such thing, Seo-yeon said smoothly. And there is no recording, no witness, nothing but Adiz's word against mine. You know how this works, Joon-ho. You have sat across the table from enough people in your life to know that conviction requires proof, not just conviction of belief. Adiz's hands had curled into fists in her lap, her eyes blazing even as Mira stirred slightly against her shoulder. There is something you don't know, Joon-ho said quietly. Min-jun isn't just pulling financial records anymore. He is talking to the photo contractor's other clients. He is building a pattern, Seo-yeon. Not just our case, but every case you have touched. And patterns like that don't stay buried, no matter how many shell companies you hide behind. For the first time, a flicker of something uncertain crossed through Seo-yeon's voice. You are bluffing. Tomorrow, at 9 a.m., I am calling an emergency board meeting, Joon-ho said. You are going to walk in not knowing exactly how much I have and not knowing exactly who has already talked. And you are going to have to decide, in front of everyone whose trust you have spent 3 years stealing, whether to keep lying or finally tell the truth. He hung up before she could respond, his hand trembling slightly as he lowered the phone. Adiz stared at him. Was that wise? Provoking her like that? No, Joon-ho admitted. But she is not going to stop coming after you regardless of what I say. I would rather she spend tonight panicking about what I actually have than spend it perfecting her next move against you. His phone buzzed again. Not Seo-yeon this time. Joon-ho answered immediately. Tell me you have something solid. I have something, Joon said, his voice tight with an urgency that made Joon-ho's stomach drop before he had even heard the details. The photo contractor finally responded. He is terrified, doesn't want to be involved in whatever this is. But he confirmed the job, confirmed the client, and he says he still has the original raw files from 3 years ago, the ones before they were composited together. That is exactly what we need. There is more. Joon's voice dropped lower. He also told me Seo-yeon contacted him again. 2 days ago. Before the gala. Before any of this became public. She asked him for something new. Joon-ho's blood ran cold. What did she ask for? A new set of composite images. This time featuring Adiz. The car went utterly silent. Composite images of what? Joon-ho asked, though some part of him already understood. Already felt the floor dropping away beneath the question. He wouldn't give me details over the phone. He is too frightened. But Joon-ho, he said the brief specifically requested images that would remove any custody claim permanently. Adiz's face had gone pale, her arms tightening instinctively around her sleeping daughter. She is not just trying to discredit me, she whispered. She is building a case to take Mira away from me completely. Remove any custody claim permanently. The words hung in the car like smoke, and Adiz felt her entire body go cold around her sleeping daughter. She wants to take Mira from me, she whispered. Not just discredit me. Take her. That is not going to happen. Joon-ho's voice was steady, but his hand had found Adiz in the darkness of the back seat, gripping it with a desperation that betrayed the calm in his words. Joon, I need that contractor talking to my lawyers tonight. Whatever it costs, whatever protection he needs, get it done. He is terrified, Joon-ho. He thinks if Seo-yeon finds out he talked, his life is over. Then we move faster than she can react. Joon-ho's mind was already working. The same precision he used to dismantle hostile takeovers now turned fully toward protecting his daughter. Get him somewhere safe tonight. Full immunity agreement, signed by my legal team within the hour, if that is what it takes. I want those raw photo files in our hands before sunrise. I will call you back in 20 minutes. The line went dead, and Joon-ho sat in the heavy silence of the car, Myra's small breathing the only sound besides his own racing heartbeat. Joon-ho. Adiz's voice was small in a way he hadn't heard since the gala. Not guarded, not composed, just frightened. What if it is not enough? What if she is smarter than all of us, and 3 years from now I am fighting her in a courtroom with fabricated evidence about my own daughter? It won't get that far. You can't promise that. He turned to face her fully, his eyes finding hers in the dim light of the parking structure. You are right. I can't promise the outcome, but I can promise you this. I am not the man who let you walk out of my life 3 years ago without a fight, because I never knew there was a fight to have. I know now. And I am not stopping until this is finished, completely, permanently, so neither of you ever has to look over your shoulder again. Adiz's eyes filled, the exhaustion and fear of the last 2 days finally breaking through the careful composure she had maintained since the moment she saw him across the ballroom. I was so angry at you, she whispered. For 3 years. I built an entire life around hating a version of you that didn't actually exist. I know. I don't know how to stop being angry at a lie that already destroyed everything. Joon-ho reached up, gently brushing a tear from her cheek, his hand lingering there with a tenderness that made her breath catch. You don't have to stop yet, he said quietly. Be angry at her. Be angry at the years we lost. But please, don't be angry at me for something I never did. I need you to believe that much, even if everything else takes time. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the air between them heavy with 3 years of grief finally beginning to find somewhere to land besides each other. Then Joon-ho's phone rang again. Joon. Tell me. Joon-ho said immediately. We have him. He has agreed to cooperate fully, full immunity, and he has already sent over the original raw files. Min-jun's voice was electric with adrenaline. Joon-ho, these are not just proof the old photos were faked. He kept metadata, timestamps, original location data embedded in every file. This is courtroom-grade evidence. This is everything. Joon-ho closed his eyes, relief washing through him so intensely his hands began to shake. And the new request, he said. The composite images of Adiz. He hasn't completed them. He stalled, claiming scheduling conflicts, because something about the brief made him uncomfortable enough to delay. But he kept her instructions in writing. Texts, emails, exactly what she wanted the images to depict and exactly why. She wrote it herself, Joon-ho. Need to establish a documented pattern of neglect and instability for custody purposes. Time sensitive. She put that in writing. People who have never been caught get careless, Min-jun said. 3 years of getting away with this made her sloppy. We have her handwriting, essentially. The entire architecture of the plan, written in her own words. Adiz, listening to every word, let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 3 years. Is it enough? She asked, her voice barely steady. Is it actually enough to stop her? It is enough to destroy her, Min-jun said. Both legally and in front of every single person who has spent the last 3 years believing she was the victim in all of this. Joon-ho looked at Adiz, something fierce and protective settling into his expression. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., the board meeting. You are really going to do this in front of everyone. She built her entire position on being trusted by my family, my board, my company, Joon-ho said. I am going to take that away from her in the exact room where she built it.
Publicly. Completely.
So there is no version of the story she can spin afterward. And Mira stays with you, with full security, somewhere she will never find her. Joon-ho's jaw set with quiet determination. Tomorrow isn't about danger anymore, Adiz. Tomorrow is about justice. And I want you there, not hiding, not protected from the truth the way you were 3 years ago. I want you in that room, hearing every word, watching her finally face what she did to both of us. Adiz was quiet for a long moment, looking down at her sleeping daughter, then back up at the man she had spent 3 years believing had betrayed her, and found, instead, sitting beside her in the dark, fighting harder for the truth than anyone ever had on her behalf. Okay, she said softly. I will be there. Joon-ho nodded, then turned back to his phone. Min-jun, send everything to my lawyers tonight. I want airtight documentation by morning. Nothing she can twist, nothing she can deny. Already in progress. Joon-ho, one more thing. Min-jun's voice shifted, careful. The contractor mentioned something else. Said Seo-yeon made a comment to him during their last conversation. Something about a backup plan, in case things didn't go smoothly tomorrow. Joon-ho's stomach tightened. What kind of backup plan? He doesn't know specifics. But he said she sounded calm about it. Calmer than someone should sound, discussing a backup plan for losing everything. The relief that had flooded through Joon-ho moments earlier curdled into something colder, sharper. Because a woman who had spent 3 years building elaborate, patient schemes, who had threatened an unborn child, forged photographs, tracked their movements in real time, wasn't the type of person to walk into a boardroom unprepared. Whatever Seo-yeon had planned for tomorrow morning, she had clearly already accepted she might lose the fight on his terms, which meant she had no intention of losing it on hers. Get everyone in that room early, Joon-ho said quietly. Security, lawyers, all of it. I have a very bad feeling tomorrow isn't going to go the way any of us are expecting. Across the city, in her office on the 40th floor, Seo-yeon sat alone in the dark, watching the lights of Seoul stretch endlessly beneath her. 3 years of careful architecture about to collapse in a single morning. She opened her desk drawer, removed a small leather folder she hadn't touched in 3 years, and placed it carefully on the desk in front of her. Inside was something far more damaging than fabricated photographs, something real, and tomorrow morning, if she was going down, she had no intention of going down alone. The Kang Holdings boardroom on the 50th floor filled slowly with executives, board members, and the quiet, electric tension of people who sensed something significant was about to happen but didn't yet know what. Joon-ho stood at the head of the table, a folder of documents in front of him, his lawyers seated to his left, Min-jun waiting just outside the door with the original case files in case they were needed. Adiz sat near the back of the room, dressed simply but with quiet dignity, her spine straight, her eyes fixed on the door. Because Joon-ho had insisted, this time, that she watch the truth unfold in person instead of waiting somewhere safe while others decided her fate. At 8:59, the door opened and Seo-yeon walked in. She looked composed. Immaculate, as always. Not a single hair out of place, her expression carrying the same warm professionalism she had spent 3 years perfecting in this exact room. If she felt any fear walking toward the seat that had, until 24 hours ago, been considered hers to keep indefinitely, she didn't show it. Her eyes found Adiz near the back of the room, and for just a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Not fear exactly, but recalculation, like a chess player realizing the board had shifted in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. "Good morning, everyone," Joon-ho said, his voice carrying the calm, controlled authority of a man who had run 1,000 meetings exactly like this one. Except this time, the deal on the table was his own family. "I called this meeting because 3 years ago, my marriage ended under circumstances I believed at the time were simple. My wife left. No explanation, no warning. I told myself and all of you that she had simply stopped loving me." He paused, letting his eyes move slowly around the table before settling, finally, on Seo-yeon. "I was wrong." A ripple of confused murmurs moved through the room. "2 nights ago, I discovered I have a daughter. Nearly 3 years old. Conceived before my wife left, and kept from me because someone in this company manufactured a campaign of lies elaborate enough to convince her I had betrayed her completely." Seo-yeon's expression didn't change, but her hands, folded carefully on the table, tightened almost imperceptibly. "I would like everyone to look at the screen," Joon-ho continued, nodding to his lawyer, who pulled up the first set of documents. The original, unedited photographs appeared. Joon-ho and Seo-yeon at a company event, years before he had even met Adiz, with metadata clearly displaying the original date and location. "These are the source images used to fabricate the photographs that ended my marriage. Composited together using a contractor paid through a shell company called Cosmos Logistics, a company linked to an account controlled by Seo-yeon's sister." The room had gone completely silent. "This is absurd," Seo-yeon said, her voice calm, almost gentle, the same practice tone she had used for 3 years to control every room she walked into. "Joon-ho, I understand you are emotional. Finding out about a child you didn't know existed, that is overwhelming for anyone. But making wild accusations against a colleague who has done nothing but support this company and this family for years. I have the contractor's testimony," Joon-ho said, cutting through her smoothly, his voice never rising. "Full immunity, fully documented, including the texts and emails where you specified exactly what you wanted the images to depict." For the first time, a crack appeared in Seo-yeon's composure. Small, but visible to everyone watching closely. "I also have a security firm payment from 3 years ago, for days before my wife left Seoul. The same firm received another payment yesterday, 90 minutes after I was seen publicly with Adiz for the first time in 3 years. This is a coordinated attack," Seo-yeon said, her voice sharpening now, losing some of its careful warmth. "I don't know what she has told you." She gestured toward Adiz without looking at her directly. "But a woman who disappeared for 3 years without explanation and suddenly reappears with a child and a story conveniently designed to extract a fortune from this family. Steady, quiet, 3 years of restraint finally speaking. I never asked for a single one," Adiz said quietly from the back of the room. It was the first time she had spoken, and every head in the room turned toward her. "I refused the settlement 3 years ago, specifically so no one could ever accuse me of leaving for money. I disappeared because a woman sat across from me in my own home while I was 7 months pregnant and told me my daughter would suffer an accident if I stayed and fought for my marriage." The silence that followed was absolute. Seo-yun's composure finally, visibly cracked. That is a lie. I never said any such thing. You are right, Joon-ho said quietly. There is no recording, no witness, just her word against yours. That is exactly what you told me on the phone 2 nights ago, isn't it? That conviction requires proof, not belief. He nodded to his lawyer again. The screen changed. A new document appeared. An email, dated 2 days before the board meeting, sender clearly listed as Seo-yun's company account. Need to establish a documented pattern of neglect and instability for custody purposes. Time-sensitive. Specifics to follow. The room erupted into stunned murmurs. You can claim the photographs 3 years ago were a misunderstanding, Joon-ho said, his voice hardening into something unmistakably final. You can claim the surveillance payments were for legitimate security purposes. But this, written in your own words, sent from your own account, 2 days ago, this is you actively planning to fabricate evidence to take my daughter away from her mother. Seo-yun's chest was rising and falling rapidly now, the mask finally slipping entirely, 3 years of careful control collapsing in real time in front of the exact people whose respect she had spent that time manufacturing. You don't understand, she said, her voice cracking. Everything I did because I believed I belonged in this family. Your mother trusted me. The board trusted me. I built a place for myself here, and I wasn't going to let some foreign woman who didn't even understand this world take it all away. Controlled fury finally cracking into raw grief by threatening to kill her unborn child. Joon-ho's voice finally rose, 3 years of grief and fury breaking through his careful composure all at once. By spending 3 years lying to my own mother? By trying, even now, to manufacture evidence to steal my daughter from the only parent who never stopped fighting for her? Seo-yun said nothing, her eyes darting around the room, searching for any ally, any sympathetic face, and finding none. Then, slowly, she reached into her bag. Security near the door tensed, moving forward instinctively, but Seo-yun simply withdrew the same small leather folder she had been holding the night before in her office. The one containing something she had called real. Before you destroy me completely, she said quietly, her voice suddenly very different. Not warm, not controlled, but something close to desperate. You should look at what is actually inside this folder. Because it isn't about the photographs or the custody scheme or any of what you just presented. She slid the folder across the table toward Joon-ho. It's about your mother, Seo-yun said. And the real reason she has wanted Ad's gone from this family since the very beginning. The room went utterly, completely silent. Joon-ho's hand hovered over the folder, his eyes lifting slowly to find his mother seated near the front of the room. Her face, for the first time in his entire life, completely unreadable. Joon-ho's hand rested on the folder for a long moment, the entire boardroom holding its breath around him. Then he looked up. Not at Seo-yun, but at his mother. Chairwoman Kang sat perfectly still near the front of the room, her face composed in the same way it had been composed through every boardroom crisis for 20 years. But her eyes, when they met her son's, carried something he had never once seen in them before, fear. Mother, he said quietly, do you know what is in this folder? A long silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Then you can tell me, Joon-ho said, or I can open it in front of everyone. His mother's hands tightened in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice had none of its usual steel. Before you were born, she said, I was married once before your father. Briefly, to a man my family approved of, and a marriage that ended within a year because I couldn't give him an heir who looked the way his family expected an heir to look. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, toward Ad's. My first husband's family was particular about lineage, about what a Kang grandchild was supposed to look like. I was young, and I believed them when they told me it was my failure, not theirs. The room was utterly silent. When you married Ad's, she continued, I told myself my concerns were about the company, about optics, about shareholders. But the truth is simpler and uglier than that. I was afraid of watching my own grandchild face the same judgment I once did. I thought if I never let that marriage take root, I could protect this family from a pain I never recovered from myself. Her eyes finally met Adi's directly. It was never about you. It was about a wound I never let heal, and I let Seo-yeon exploit it because some part of me wanted to believe she was right. Seo-yeon, watching the confession unfold, seemed to realize in real time that the folder hadn't been the weapon she had hoped it would be. It hadn't turned the room against Adi's or Joon-ho. It had simply revealed a sad, human history that explained the mother's bias without excusing what Seo-yeon herself had done with it. That doesn't change what you did, Joon-ho said, turning back to Seo-yeon, his voice hard again. My mother's pain is hers to carry and hers to answer for. But you didn't just take advantage of an old wound. You manufactured evidence. You threatened a pregnant woman's life. You tried, 2 days ago, to fabricate a custody case against her. That was never about loyalty to this family. That was about what you wanted for yourself. Seo-yeon had no answer left. The folder she had hoped would be a final act of leverage had simply confirmed, for everyone in the room, exactly how far she was willing to go. Using even Joon-ho's mother's private grief as a tool, the same way she had used everything else. Security, Joon-ho said quietly. Please escort Ms. Yoon from the building. Legal will be in contact regarding the criminal complaint. Seo-yeon didn't fight it. 3 years of careful architecture collapsed in the space of 20 minutes, and as she was led from the room, she didn't look at Joon-ho, or at Adi's, or at the chairwoman. She looked, instead, completely hollow. A woman who had spent so long building a place for herself in someone else's family that she had never built anything of her own to stand on once it was gone. The boardroom emptied slowly afterward, executives filing out in hushed, stunned conversation, until only Joon-ho, Adi's, and the chairwoman remained. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Joon-ho's mother rose from her seat and walked, slowly, toward Adi's. Her posture stripped of its usual commanding distance, replaced by something far more uncertain. I owe you an apology. I don't know how to give properly, she said quietly. 3 years of judgment you never deserved. A grandchild I let myself be kept from out of fear I never had the courage to face honestly. Adiz studied her for a long moment. 3 years of grief, of being dismissed before she had ever had a chance to be known, sitting heavy between them. I am not going to pretend that doesn't still hurt, Adiz said finally. But I understand pain that goes unhealed long enough to become something uglier. I've carried my own version of that these last 3 years. She paused. If you want to know your granddaughter, that has to be earned slowly. Not because of the company or the optics or any version of this family that needs an heir to look a certain way. Because you actually want to know her. The chairwoman's eyes filled, an emotion utterly foreign to the boardroom she had commanded for 2 decades. I would like that very much. That evening, Joon-ho stood on the balcony of his penthouse. The same penthouse Adiz had walked out of 3 years earlier with 2 suitcases and a heart she believed had been completely betrayed. Watching the sun set gold and orange over a city that finally felt different beneath it, Adiz stepped out beside him, Mira asleep in her arms, worn out from a long, overwhelming day that she was far too young to understand the weight of. What happens now? Adiz asked quietly. Joon-ho turned to face her fully, and for the first time since the gala, there was no urgency in his expression, no fear, no countdown clock ticking somewhere in the background. Just quiet, steady hope. Now, he said, I don't ask you to come back to me because of what we lost. I ask you to let me earn what we could still have. Slowly, honestly, with nothing hidden between us ever again. Not because of Mira. Because of you. Adiz's eyes filled, 3 years of careful walls finally beginning to come down, not from pressure or persuasion, but from a truth that had finally, completely surfaced into the light. I am not the same woman who left 3 years ago, she said softly. I know, Joon-ho said. I don't want her back. I want to know who you have become. Mira stirred slightly in her sleep, one small hand curling instinctively around the collar of her mother's dress, and Adiz looked down at her daughter. At the family she had built alone out of necessity, now standing at the edge of something neither of them had to face alone anymore. Then earn it, Adi said quietly, a small, exhausted, hopeful smile finally breaking through.
Slowly.
Honestly, I am not in a hurry anymore. Joon-ho reached for her hand, and this time, she let him hold it. Below them, Seoul glittered on into the evening, indifferent to the quiet restoration happening 11 floors above its streets. A family rebuilding itself not through revenge or vindication, or even the truth finally being told, but through the much slower, much harder work of choosing each other, one honest day at a time. And somewhere across that same city, in a holding room inside a financial crimes division building she had never imagined herself sitting in, Yoon Seo-yeon folded her hands on a cold metal table and waited for a lawyer she wasn't sure could save her. The case, it turned out, had only just begun. If you want a Season 2, comment Season 2 on the comment section, as the first 100 comment in 3 hours would determine if the Season 2 would be released. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.